Hello, how's everybody? Everybody good? All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It's 6 o'clock. So this week we were looking at a bus wreck. Activity bus has a minor fender bender. What do you do? So here are some ideas of the folks that we had. Here's our stars of the week. Lillian said she talked with her principal, and there's a lot of policies that you have to go by before, during, and as a result of, and just to have one. David made a great point. Star of the week material here. If you're taking special needs kids on the trip, that's why they call them special needs kids. They'll require different things on the and if you have an accident, God forbid, they require additional things as well. And so you better have additional people along there with you just in case an accident comes. That's a good catch. Special needs means special needs. If you're taking them anywhere, a whole nother level of things. Now, Michelle did a really good job. She's got a very thorough accounting of all those policies about getting permission, approval, what has to happen, supervision, what would happen after. She did a good job. Becca did as well. She did a good job outlining all those things. And so was very good. So those are our stars of the week on discussion board 6. And Rebecca had one. She mentioned you might need to do crowd control, but she also talked about might be smart to take pictures. And I thought, that's not a bad idea, except, let me stop this. My signal's a little weak right now. What's the problem with taking pictures, Sean?
Trying to think about, well, there's the permission, has people giving you permission to take pictures? It's on a private phone.
There you go.
I think that'd be the biggest one because you're now putting government evidence onto your own personal device.
There you go. Just like taking a knife away from a kid and putting it in your pocket. Same thing. So, but Becca was clear. If you're taking pictures, what are you taking pictures of? The accident scene. Yeah. Be careful. Don't take pictures of kids. You're still taking a risk by photographing the accident, but in North Carolina, and I think South Carolina, it's a little bit nebulous, is a one-party permission state. So that means that you don't have to have both parties' permission to do that, to film or video or take a picture, but you can't be taking pictures of video of kids, by the way. That'll end your career right there. You cannot, that's a FERPA violation in a big way, to be taking pictures of videos of kids. So the idea is take pictures of video of the accident scene, but don't have any faces of don't have any kids in it.
It almost seems, I was going to say, it almost seems just, look, law enforcement knows what they're doing. They have a job to do. Let law enforcement do its job. You do your job, which is take care of kids.
That is correct.
And fire it up the chain so the chain can handle the public affairs, the press, and get you the new bus and the parents, all that. You secure the scene and let everybody else do their job.
That's why I said Becca was a star of the week, because she was talking about crowd control. That's what we call that collectively. You need to be doing crowd control. Now, she said, might be a case where you might want to take a picture. Again, I concede that. I'm not going to argue that. I feel more like Sean does, though. I've never advocated taking pictures, but truthfully, it is legal. It's just not smart. But if you're taking pictures, make sure it's only of something germane to the accident scene. Don't have any people in it, especially don't have any kids in it. But you're exactly right. The police are going to come. You call them, they're going to document all that stuff. There may be a case, I'll concede there might be some reason sometime that you would take a picture. Okay. Prefer you to be involved with crowd control. But if you're going to take a picture, you feel the need, make sure It only has things and not people of any kind in it. Adults, kids, or otherwise. Kids will end your career. Adults is not a good idea either, but kids will end your career if you take pictures of them. So be careful. Focus on the crowd control. But if I know, I get it. Y'all know I'm 1,000 years older than y'all. And I'm sitting there looking at Olivia smiling. People of her generation, they lived their life taking pictures. I bet if you got on her phone right now, she'd have 1,000,003 pictures on her phone. That's a generational thing.
Yeah, but hers are of a cute baby. So,
pardon?
But hers are of a cute baby, so we can forgive it.
Again, that's exactly right, and we support that 1,000% with cute babies. We just got back from dinner, and there was a cute one at dinner tonight, and I, look at me as big as I am. I couldn't even focus on it because I was making faces at the baby. Baby thought Santa Claus had come to supper with him at the beach. And so, but again, Sean's exactly right. When we're in that situation, we have a job to do. Our job first is to call and get emergency services, 911, get them there. We work with crowd control. We don't investigate. We certainly don't give statements. We don't call parents. Somebody at your public information or the bus garage is assigned to do that. You have a particular role in this organization. If and when you step outside of that role, you assume a lot of responsibility that you really don't need to be assuming. Things can go bad. You need to do your part. I like the crowd control. The pictures, I understand, of a certain generation. There's a lot of people who believe if you didn't take a picture of it, it didn't happen. It doesn't exist. I get that. I don't agree with that, but I understand it. That's a way that a lot of people live their lives now. But don't get caught up in that. And the reason I mentioned it, don't get caught up in that and thinking it's okay to take pictures of kids. It's okay to take pictures of other people. It's not, and it will go really, really bad for you. Okay, so those were our stars of the week. Work's been good. Make sure that you're keeping up your pacing. We've only got a couple more. We've only got one more class session and one more case study. So it's about to be done here, folks. It's about to be done. So you know where you are, what you need to do. No, that's enough said about that. All right, case study 9, my favorite. Y'all are getting better every time. The group last night impressed me. That's hard to do. Let's see what y'all do tonight. All right, who hadn't been first? Let me stop my video so you can share your screen. All right, let's share your screen. Let's get on with this thing.
My group, do y'all want to go first?
Yeah, I was about to say Jessica.
I want y'all to go first. Go.
Okay.
I can share it. Let me pull this up really quick. Okay, is everybody able to see the slideshow?
Yes, we are.
Okay, excellent. So here we are tonight. We're doing case study 3. We are normal 2. Again, it's presented by me, Leslie, Norman, Jessica, Lakeitha, and then also Lillian. And Lakeitha will start us off.
All right. So is it a veil threat? Would you consider what Mary Lou's comment? Would you consider it a veil threat? My first initial, others may have a different standpoint, so they may think that it was a threat. I believe that in her position, that it was not a threat, that she was really leaning towards having safety for all students, and that all students, regardless of their sexual orientation, fall under the Equal Access Act, which means that she has to maintain order and discipline on the school premises.
All right, we'll stop right there. Back up one. All right. It is a veil threat. How can I say that so clearly with such conviction that it is a veil threat?
Okay.
Go back to 115C288, duties and responsibilities of a principal. There's two different reporting functions. One says report acts to law enforcement and the superintendent. The other one says report to superintendent. If she had reported this to the superintendent and had brought help in and had done official reporting on this one, then I could go for the idea that she was just concerned. By her not having reported this to the superintendent, what was she trying to do? She was trying to pressure, force, threaten parents and students to go along with what she wanted, so it wouldn't become out and become a public relations and feed the public relations nightmare that she already had. So the litmus test when you go to court, have she had reported this to the superintendent and they had gone through the proper channels, sent out the Title IX people and done all those kinds of things? And no, it would have simply been a caution that this could happen. The way that she did it basically is heckler's veto, the loudest and stupidest get their way, implied threat. What they would ask in court is, do you have a credible threat for this person, that somebody was going to harm these kids? And when you said no, then you would have been damned, because you're just making threats because you haven't reported to your superintendent. If you said, yes, I have credible threats, why didn't you report it to law enforcement and then your superintendent? Either way, one of those two things was supposed to happen in a case like this. Either report to the superintendent if there wasn't a credible threat, to law enforcement, and then the superintendent if there was a credible threat.
Yeah, we said it later in our slides, but I initially thought that we were looking at her position.
But this is a really easy one. When you look at something like this, go back to the law, the reporting law, and you can make a determination. That's why I want to make sure. It does look like but if she hasn't reported it, then legally, I can't know what was in her heart, but legally, the litmus test is, did you do one of these two reports that you were required to do? If you didn't, then you've just threatened somebody.
Okay.
Excellent. Move on.
All right, so on to her responsibilities. We put on here, of course, school districts have legal obligation under the Equal Protection Clause of that 14th Amendment to protect students from discrimination. So that was number one of her responsibility, and that ties into what you were just talking about with reporting to superintendent or law enforcement. Had we went that route, if she would have needed to do that. Excuse me, sorry, my allergies are acting out. And then we talked about sexual harassment as well. With this being a case of possible sexual harassment, making sure that somebody trained would be able to investigate those complaints and make sure that it was thoroughly and properly investigated.
Excellent. Lillian has just reminded us of that new section under Title IX, that you got to bring in somebody outside to do that Title IX and that sexual investigation. That's a good catch, Lillian. That's exactly right. That's why you have to do that reporting piece, because you're now required to report and bring somebody in from outside. There is no handling sexual stuff in-house. That's gone. That's not a thing. You either report to law enforcement or the superintendent, and then the superintendent, or the superintendent first. That's the rules now on anything that has sexual connotations.
And next we discussed risk management when we were looking at chapter 5 in our guide to school law. We were talking about perspective since the beginning. So you want to make sure that you're addressing problems from an educational perspective first, and then as a punitive measure second. Looking at the emotional aspect of it. So concentrating on where the message landed rather than where it was launched from. We felt like you were talking about earlier, she really went with the parents' reactions and the students, and just trying to get on board with that instead of actually focusing on how this could also impact the students at this against, and then also just making it simple. So creating a supportive school climate to lessen the likelihood of bullying, and then also to make sure that we're always empowering our students.
All right. So should Mary Lou allow them to go to prom? This is the easy decision. Yes. If she doesn't, it would be a form of discrimination. You have to let them go. So for the ending side, for the impact, for the student well-being, you need to allow them to go. You're going to have more issues if you don't. Mishandling it could lead to intention, legal issues, and a dividing of the school community. And as we've already established, this, if you don't let them go, this could be all other kinds of ethical standards, and then you would have to get it out of the house of the school, and then it would go to law issues. So you need to make sure that you handle it with delicacy. And that wraps us up.
All right, you can
Thank
stop your share. All right, now. Does it matter that these kids were gay? No.
Nope.
This case is not about gay. This case is about federally protected status. If you don't know that, write that down. I just happened to pick a case where the kids were gay. I could have picked if they were EC. I could have picked if they were 504. I could have picked if they were in Title I. Anytime you have kids with a federally protected status, there are additional due process protections that they have. You have to know that. Just like we talked about all the hoops you got to go through with a manifestation determination, that's part of due process. Remember all that extra stuff to discipline an EC kid? Any kid that has is in a federally protected category or status, there's extra due process that you have to do. So this case could have been about EC kids. Would we say, cause y'all are EC, y'all can't come to the prom? Well, that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But there's been a time in our history when we did that. We wouldn't even let them come to school, much less go to prom. So this is about federally protected status. All right. Where was the FERPA violation in this case?
So I struggled when I was looking at this, when I came across one of the website when I was looking at, if I think I got this off the Department of Ed's website, if gender identity or sexual orientation can be inferred or is explicitly stated in the school records, then those are educational records, and you are bound by FERPA to not reveal them.
That
You
is
follow
correct. Federally protected status. That's what that means. What Sean just defined it for you. That means they have a federally protected status. You say, but they're not EC. They have a federally protected status because it's in the school record. All right. So that means talking to Jerry and Cindy Hudson. Was that a FERPA violation, Sean?
Again, I'll go back to the. Can I put the one it depends on?
Yeah.
If it's part in that school, if sexual orientation is part of the student records, then yes, that's a FERPA violation. If it's not part of the student records, then it's not a FERPA violation. Though I would add this to it. It is morally wrong of the principal to discuss any specific student with any other parent. Don't care.
There you go.
You shouldn't do it no matter what.
For the standard of FERPA here, because they declared that they were gay and wanted to form a gay-straight alliance, we have indisputable evidence that they have declared that that's in the school record. So that's a FERPA violation. But Sean is right. It's never a good practice, even if they haven't declared that they are, to discuss anybody's children with anybody else's parents. So there is a FERPA violation here because they are a federally protected status, because they voluntarily identified themselves and said, we're this, we want this alliance. We that was one of their demands. All right. So that makes it a FERPA violation. Yes.
So question on, I know, Kat, would you get out of the way, please? The students behaving in public, it appears that the relationship is public knowledge. Does that change? And I'm not trying to make an argument against the FERPA, but I'm just questioning, does that change any legal stance because of the potential public knowledge of their relationship?
Yes and no. All right. That was going to be the next question. Where did the principal go down the wrong path from the very beginning? This is a perfect case of antecedent behaviors. The little things become the big things. Now, to your point, if we had stopped the public display of affections because they were gay and we allowed the straight kids to continue to do that, that would have been a problem. Can't do that. The whole idea is we don't let anybody do PDAs. And so back to Sean's point, there is, because they were out, and because they had claimed membership in this federally protected group, there's no litmus test. It's just self-identification. If they say they are publicly, then they are. There's no, I know, gaydar or whatever, insert bad joke here. But when they identify that they are, it's not like we have to test them, like for EC. This is a self-selecting category. And so once they say they are, they are. Now, does that affect FERPA or no? They get FERPA protection immediately when they say they are. Now, the bigger issue here is PDA, public display of affection, antecedent behaviors. We should have stopped this and not let it get out of control. This is what happens when you don't address the little things. It gets out of control. But again, you can't just address it with the gay kids and let the straight kids continue to do whatever they want to do. But this is a perfect example of antecedent behaviors that this thing spun completely out of control. All right. The principal and everybody paid there is a responsible person. We've talked about that. These kids are being harassed. What was the superintendent? What was the principal's responsibility? Was to inform the superintendent. I would argue that I would have informed law enforcement on Jerry and Cindy Hudson, and then the superintendent. But I would have already called the superintendent on about what was going on here with these kids. I would have already done that as a responsible person. So I said, because the principal is the ultimate responsible person in the building, had a duty to do one or two things or both. I would have done both when Jerry and Cindy come in. I would inform police that they're making bullying and threatening comments in my presence. Now, I'm not going to be Barney and try to do a citizen's arrest or whatever, or Gomer, but now I'm going to tell the police because I'm a responsible person. What happens if something bad happens to one of these kids? What happens if one of these kids' parents shoots Jerry or Cindy? Oh my goodness. I would have passed this one on. I would inform law enforcement and the superintendent on this one. I think, again, because they're a federally protected class and because she didn't report, it's clear that it's a threat. It's a veiled threat. Heckler's veto is loudest and stupidest. If somebody is screaming and yelling, they're going to harm these kids, then you deal with them. You can't punish the victim. We have to be careful that the whole idea of Heckler's veto is punishing. We take the rights away from one group because we're afraid of what another group might do. Well, that's punishing the victim. We can't do that. That would be the problem there. In this case, the First and 14th Amendments were violated. Free speech and the 14th Amendment, equal protection. Of course, Title IX was violated. ESSA, North Carolina and South Carolina bullying laws were both violated. Tinker versus Des Moines, the kids get due process. And so my last question on this one is this. The kids want to do a day of silence or whatever around the flagpole. Does the school have to organize that? No. One of the persons last night was talking about they let the kids organize at their school. They went out there and they came back to class. Somebody said, well, if they don't come back, well, then they're tardy. That's a disciplinary issue if they don't come back. But yes, we can let them do that. It doesn't have to be faculty led. But now here's the question for you. Remember this semester I told you our job was to learn how to build a legal master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. Now, if these kids want to form a gay straight alliance and have a school club just like Key Club or DECA club, whatever club, are they allowed to have that? Absolutely.
As long as they follow board policy and school rules.
That's right. what if there's no faculty that will volunteer to be their faculty sponsor? They're required to have that for supervision purposes. Remember, second shift, you got to have people supervising, and part of that is club activities are after school now, and we have to have an adult that's there supervising them. What if they can't get an adult to supervise them or agree to be their faculty sponsor? Should you assign a faculty to be their faculty sponsor? John says no. I'm afraid the answer is yes.
Really? Because that I just read 2 cases and I wish I could remember them off the top of my head. I think Kluge's one, and gosh, I can't remember the name of the second one, where, and this may be where teachers were, this was the case of being required to use non-preferred pronouns and being terminated from their jobs. They prevailed, making both Title VII civil rights arguments and violation of their First Amendment right to freedom of speech that are coerced.
All right, that doesn't fit this case. You remember in your teacher contract, other duties assigned by the principal?
There it goes. Thank you.
I was about to jump
This
in
is
and
a
say,
duty.
when you do
This
a
is not
contract, you
language.
can.
Pardon?
I said I was going to jump in and say your contract says if the principal assigns you a duty like that, you have to participate after like club and stuff. Like we signed that contract and we have to do that duty.
That's exactly right. Other duties assigned by the principal, that falls under that. That's where we get the super. So I said it's stupid to put a sign up for after school activities in the lounge. What if nobody shows up? No, what if nobody signs up? You don't have adequate supervision. Do you think that you could go to court and say, well, I wanted somebody to go out there and be with them, but nobody signed up? You think that'd stand up in court? You have the authority as principal. You have the duty to assign people to the supervision schedule. If you know those kids are going to come. So we had a case at Harding High School where we knew kids congregated outside the building after the bell rang, and the principal would lock the door and refuse to send anybody out to supervise. The girl got raped. And to make it even worse, the parent worked in the district, and it was known wide and far and wide that the principal refused to assign teachers to supervise those kids that were outside.
So if I run that logic down a little more, I think it's one of those where you got to be careful, and well, it's careful. You have to be specific in who you would assign, because what you don't want to run down is assigning somebody who then throws "this violates my conscience" and then sues you, or you end up firing the individual, and then
you're just supervising kids. It's got nothing to do with their orientation. They're a school club, the content of which, I mean, would you be mad at, I don't like what DECA does, because every time they go on a field trip, they come back, they're drunk while they're gone and get in trouble. I don't like them either. But that's the reason why we have people supervise them. There's no standing in that deal. All you're doing is there's a number of kids you've been, part of your contract is, and part of what our legal responsibility is, while they're on our campus, they have to be supervised. But nobody asked you to participate with them, whatever they was doing.
Nobody asked you to endorse their behavior.
That is correct. Don't have to. The worst job I ever had in the school business? I had to coach girls JV basketball in high school one year at Central High School, Olivia. I had the girls JV basketball team. I'd rather get a root canal with no painkiller than coach JV girls basketball at high school. But we didn't have anybody, and that I got assigned that extra duty. That's that. But they had to have supervision. They had to have supervision. And so if this group is going to have a club, now they're going to have a club, whether you tell, one way or the other. They're going to be just like at Harding. They're going to be out there in a group. Now you can refuse to acknowledge it like they did at Harding and lock the door and say, well, if we ignore it, they'll go away. They didn't go away. What they were doing, quite honestly, now this has been a minute, and some of you are old enough and might have participated in it. I'm looking at you, Roger. They were doing rap battles, poetry, song, dance, spinning. You remember that? And they were doing that. They were. I mean, it was fairly well organized, like 2 or 3 days a week. they would meet, you know, in the courtyard at Harding High School right after school and start, you know, they do the slam poetry. They did it all, you know, whoever wanted to do whatever. Black, white, Hispanic. I mean, all the kids were into that back then. It wasn't a racial thing or any of that. It was just a thing. But the school said, no, we don't support that. So we're not going to send anybody. We're going to lock the doors and, you know, ignore it. Well, you ignored it, your peril. What does that manual that I keep going back to every time say? You're responsible for your campus, right? And it says that clearly for the activities on your campus. And if you know that you've got a group meeting twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday, or Monday and Thursday, and they're doing, you know, all these different arts type things, you better have somebody out there supervising it. They didn't. The girl got raped. Boy, it went bad. I can't tell you how bad it went. I can't tell you how bad it went.
Dr. Lamb, can I jump in real quick with a question, please, sir? So I understand through some of the readings that you, I mean, this is a heated situation. You have
Yes,
100 parents. You have 100 parents.
Right.
100 parents and students, by the way, signing
Yep.
petitions. The principal's in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Can you, I understand through some of the reading that you can't like tone down the controversy by calling the group diversity club or tolerance club or something. That also infringes on the students' rights to be treated equally. But could you, in an effort to get around this, because this is big, can you just shut down all clubs in your school? You just shut them all down?
No. And
Equal Access Act of 1984. You take federal funds, you have to allow any group to meet on campus, and you can't deny it based on, I got the notes over here in a second, but philosophy, religion, political point of view, you can't deny them access.
Yeah, I've got it written down, the acronym written down right here to remind me of that, the Equal Access Act, EASA right here. I've got it written down. No, that came up. That's come up before several times. That's what you'd want to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to do, but you're not allowed to, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to do that because that might cool things off. But then there's certain groups in your building. If you shut them down, their parents are a lot more powerful. You know, the Monogram Club, the Key Club, some of those clubs, if you told them they couldn't meet, I mean, that's un-American if you don't let the Monogram Club meet.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia, you're moving from Central to East this year, is that correct? So
Yes.
One of the stories, a forever story in Rutherford County was, they used to have a annual faculty student basketball game where all the men coaches and administrators or whoever played the Monogram Club. Now the Monogram Club, they played basketball in the gym. The Monogram Club, they couldn't have the basketball players, but they could have everybody else, and they played the faculty every year, and people came. I mean, in Rutherford County, I mean, it was kind of like the day that they opened the lake over to isothermal and fish. The next day, when all the little towns call in the crime report, nothing to report. Because every crook in the counties over on the fish, the bank of Lake Imogene fishing over to isothermal the one day a year at the community college, and they opened up the lake and let them fish. Well, the crime report the next day in Rutherford County after the Monogram Club ball games was nothing, because everybody in the county would go to those ball games. It was a big thing. They did a blindside pick on Ray Husky, and poor old Ray, he was the only man I ever knew in the history of Rutherford County that wore a wig. He went this way and his wig went that way. I was there. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. I could have made $1 million if we had a YouTube video of that. But if you think for a minute that you could stop the Monogram Club in a county like Rutherford County, that you could shut them down over some gay kids in another club, oh my God. Oh my God. but circling back to where we started this, and this is the kind of conversations I like. See, when the first breeze of this came through, I'd have taken my lumps on, not dealing with the PDA. I'd have got the superintendent involved immediately and law enforcement, because this is not going to get better, folks. Somebody's going to end up hurt in a case like this nowadays. David's made a great point. These people are not going to be rational. It's going to get out. It's not going to calm down. It's just going to grow. It's just going to be like a wildfire. I don't know if stopping PDAs could have helped it or not, but it would have been what you could have done, and you would have had a clean conscience when you picked up the phone and called the superintendent and said, it's out of control over here. Somebody's going to get hurt. It's out of control. And I would have probably called the police first and then the superintendent, but I'd have called them both and said, these people are coming in now. They're threatening. These kids are in danger. It's, the world has retreated in the last, I was showing a picture last night of me and my wife at the prom at Panther Stadium. I wore a Panther. I'm wearing Panther blue tonight. I had on Panthers logo shirt last night, and somebody said, you a big Panther fan? I said, no. But they treated me like gold when I was a high school principal in Charlotte. When they first got started, I was a high school principal when they came to town in '95. They treated me and us like gold. They let me have our prom because we didn't have any money. We still owed from the last year's prom. We had our prom for 2 years in the club area at the stadium for free. They paid for all the security. It was the decorations. It was wonderful. They sent people out to the school to work with kids. That was a different ownership group, and you can think what you want to of him. But now I'm going to tell you right now, Mr. Richardson treated us like gold in the school business. Pepsi-Cola did too. Pepsi-Cola bottling. And so, the gym at UNCC is named for him. And they were great to us. And we had a lot of gay kids back then. We had a lot of kids that we called them cross dressers. Now they're transgender. We had all of that back then. We didn't have any problem with it. I'm just going to tell you right now, we didn't have any problem with it in Charlotte. But that was a different time and a different place. These rural areas now, somebody gets hurt in these places. It gets out of control real quickly now. You got to call the superintendent. You got to call law enforcement. You got to stop all displays of public affection, whether it's boys and girls or boys and boys and girls and girls. I mean, this started out with, letting this thing get out of control and then not getting people involved, trying to handle it yourself. But again, Sean's exactly right. You can't deny the other clubs from their existence. You can assign teachers additional duties assigned by the principal in this case, but when this thing got out of control, the appropriate calls weren't made. So yeah, that would be a threatening situation if you've not brought in help. If you were really concerned, you would have brought in help. Now that's what they'll tell you in court too. If you were so concerned that you threatened these kids, then why didn't you call the superintendent or law enforcement or both? You must not have been too concerned. Isn't it under 115C288? Didn't you have a legal duty to call them? Well, yeah. Well, why didn't you call them? If you felt it was this big a problem, why didn't you call? It's kind of like it wasn't too big, but it was big enough that you threatened them, but not that you didn't call. How could that be? That's a contradiction.
So Dr. Lamb, thanks for saying that, because that really fills in some gaps for me. But let me just take it a step further. What would the superintendent do to quell the parents and bring the temperature down in your school? Like,
Send
he's not
counselors
working there. Like, what would happen?
In that right back there, is my niece. She's a what is she? Office. She's the director of a private counseling group in Statesville, North Carolina. They do a lot of contract work in schools when cases like this, by the way, or if a kid gets killed or any kind of a tragedy in schools, what they do is they have a number of offices, but they contract with school districts to be on standby if an emergency like this happens. They bring those counselors in right quick. You bring in the rapid response team. We had that in Charlotte where you bring in extra security personnel. You bring in extra counselors, you bring in social workers, you bring in Title IX people.
Wow.
That school would have about 30 people in it tomorrow. Seriously, about 30. 10, 10, and 10. 10 counselors, 10 social workers, 10. Our rapid response team had 10 on it. We would bring them in. We would bring in public information office and start, and we would have a parent meeting fairly quickly. We would get the public information office involved. We would get several of the departments throughout the school district. We would mobilize them immediately to try to not just put a lid on it, but to try to address the issues that these folks have. We bring in the legal team, the general counsel and the associate general counsel and their people, and we would explain. We would bring in our compliance technicians, the federal people who make sure that we pay, that make sure that we meet all the requirements for federal protected classes, all the paperwork, the FERPA's being upheld. We bring all them in, so we would have another probably 30 people that we wouldn't physically bring them to the campus, but we would bring them into this issue, making sure that they were doing our community and schools people. We'd bring them in that have a lot of contacts. I mean, this is out of control. This is a serious thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
But thank you. But just bringing the kids and their parents in and threatening them is not going to fix this problem. Well, you're talking about putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You're going to have to go everything you got on a case like this nowadays. Everything you got, all the resources of the district have to be put behind this. Because guess what? If you don't get it controlled here, the next high school it will spread from high school to high school. They'll be marching. The kids will be protesting at the next high school. That don't even know Jimmy and Willie, because guess what? They're gay kids over at the next high school too. And so, yeah, there was a lot of things that went wrong in this one, a lot. But the key is stop the little behaviors, and if you did your best, but you got to call in the big dogs on this one: police, law enforcement, superintendent, all of the resources of the district to get something like this stopped. Otherwise, somebody's going to end up hurt badly. Great question. All right, we got another group ready to go.
Olivia, you got the thing. I think we're the only other group.
Me and Althea are here too. Me and Althea are a group.
Yeah.
Are we running with it?
Yeah, Roger, can you?
Yeah.
Roger's got it.
All right. I downloaded it.
Roger's the man.
Please forgive me if you hear a loud band in the background.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You got band camp this week?
Yes, Lord.
That's because Roger is bringing the music.
And I'm telling you what.
It's 91 degrees right now. They in there.
Yeah.
We're gonna go outside in about 30 minutes though.
As soon as the heat gets below, we used to wouldn't let them go out until it was below 85.
Yeah, we have that heat advisory, so we can't take them out right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Roger, y'all running in the morning and in the afternoon?
Huh?
Y'all running in the morning and afternoon and avoiding the heat in the middle of the day?
This week it's just afternoon. Next week is from 7 to 8.
Yeah.
8. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't, you only, let's see, you can do 2 a days, but you got to worry about the heat. But yeah, it's all, the number of contact hours is all preset for you. But yeah, you got to know that too. And yet, well, your athletic director's got to know that as a school administrator and make sure that they're keeping up with all that stuff on participation and having water and heat advisory. And in the wintertime on the hilltop of, at the old school, Olivia, We monitor. We had a big thermometer. We had to come inside if it got below 45. Baseball used to start back then. Now it starts later, but back then, when I was a baseball coach at Central, we started at February 1st. And on the hilltop, on the top of the hill, that's the highest part of the county outside of Lake Lure, Chimney Rock. I mean, that because the center field fence had the fence post in the center, had the radio tower for the radio station. It was the highest point around, and so we didn't count wind chill. But when the thermometer dropped below 45, we had to go in the gym. We had to go to the girls' gym over in the main building because basketball was still going on in the other gym. But yeah, you got all those rules. You got to know that stuff. The liability on that will you definitely will lose your house on that liability if you don't keep up with your athletics. But that's your athletic director has to know all those things and monitor that daily. Especially now, Roger, I can tell you, I know Roger would follow the law. Band people are the best people to work with. They are the model. The football team, that's a bunch of cheaters. I'm telling you what, everywhere you go. Football's the worst. You have to watch them like a hawk, and they still do stuff that's bad. Always. Bands like the band has the best kids in the building, and they have and band people follow rules and behavior. They have good discipline. Football's awful, just awful, just a bunch of bandits in football. You got to have a separate athletic director just to watch football. It's just the truth.
But luckily, I am not under athletics, so I take care of what.
Yeah, in college level, but we're talking about, at the high school level. Yes, I get it.
Yes, sir.
All right, Roger, lead us off here.
All right, welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce Team OSR, Olivia, Sean, and myself, Roger. We are doing case study number 4. We are normal 2. Right, and I'm passing it on to Sean.
I can figure out how to work technology and turn on a mic. I want to try not to hit what we've talked about already, so forgive me if I do, and if I do, just shut me up and I'll move on to the next point. So veiled threat. Yeah, reading it, my first read of the case study when I read it was like, yeah, that's a veiled threat. And then I tried to do some research on, okay, so what would it take to be a legal threat? I came across, you got to essentially meet 4 criteria. You got to meet that. What was the speaker's intent and what was their state of mind? That comes out of a Supreme Court case, Virginia versus Black, where Virginia had a law in the book said, just by burning a cross in your yard, you show intent to intimidate, and that was unconstitutional. So the speaker has to intend the threat, and you have to ascertain that for it to be a true threat. Does the speaker know the effects of their speech? That comes out of Counterman versus Colorado. So that the speaker has to know that they are communicating a threat. They have to intend. So what we know, they have to intend the threat. They have to know that they are communicating a threat in order to be an illegal speech, I should say. You also get into, does the speaker, so could the threat have been carried out, and how did the receiver react? Those factor into making a threat illegal speech, but they are not as important as the first two is, what was the speaker's state of mind? So that's just what I found interesting about, does this cross the bar between being something Mary Lou should not have said, was a not smart thing to say, and was it illegal for her to say under the criminal code? So like I said, I still think wherever you fall down, legal, illegal, it was probably one of the dumbest things she could have said, was say, we can't do that because you might get beat up. And as we've already talked about, if you're that concerned about them getting beat up, why weren't you doing something already?
Exactly. You had a duty. Again, this is nonfeasance. You had a duty to report. It says so right there in 115C. You had a duty to report. If you considered this to be if these kids were in danger, you had a duty to report. You didn't. And so now you're telling them that something bad can happen to them. Again, in court, it's like we said last night. Bill said 6 of one, half dozen the other. Take your poison here. You go to court, you lose. If you felt like it was a threat and you didn't report it, well, then you're guilty. If you didn't feel, if you did feel like it was a threat, why didn't you report it to the superintendent and law enforcement? Communicating threats, that's one of those that has a general statute number on it. Remember that handy dandy manual that I refer to all the time as the Bible? If you go under it and look where it says communicating threats, it has a general statute number, which means you have to call law enforcement. You're duty bound to do that. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But Sean's exactly right. It may be the single stupidest thing that you'll read in any of these case studies is to do that. But
all right, let's go on to the next slide, because that leads me up to the other part of her conversation when she was telling them, so, hey, but what was it she said exactly is people could beat you up. Oh, this could cause a disturbance to the school. Okay, yes, you can restrict students' First Amendment right to speech if it does or has been shown to in the past disturb the educational environment. If I see in my notes the better words I pulled out of Tinker, I'll read those. But again, we go back to, if there was a credible threat against these kids, then okay, you should have done something. And two, you're trying to build a flimsy argument under Tinker to restrict their speech. No, sorry, can't do that. So don't. Let's see here. Oh, the speech can be censored if it's materially or substantially disruptive to the educational process. The PDA piece. Can you restrict PDA like we've been talking about that you should have in the first place? Absolutely, in accordance with board policy, and you do it to everybody. Yep. There was a case I read about, Juan versus Wolf out of California in 2007 that goes over this. The students involved in that case went much further than just holding hands and sued because they were discriminated against. The students lost because the PDA policy was being enforced as uniformly as possible by the people required to enforce it. So you want to enforce the PDA policy, just don't make up your rules, do the same to everyone.
A caution here, let me, again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sean.
Please
remember that when you enter your incidents in Power School, there's a record of them. It won't look good if this is the only PDA that you've entered all year long. Yeah. And they, with a push of a button, that comes out with a push of a button. It takes about 30 seconds to run that report. And it better not be that the only time that you punish the kids for PDA is the two gay kids. That will not go well for you. You have just produced the evidence against yourself. So the important part of what Sean just said was it's been enforced uniformly for everybody. That would be that not arbitrarily. Remember, our standards are arbitrary and capricious. In this case, the PDA policy, it's from the state manual. The punishment for it goes to the code of conduct, and the punishment's been decided by the local board of education. And then Power School tracks whether you have been enforcing that or not. And it can't be arbitrarily that it's only, if we pull it out, it's only the gay kids that you've been enforcing it on.
I made a note in here about heckler's veto. Mary Lou's actions in this case study appeared to be guided by her concern of the heckler's veto. You cannot use that just because somebody's going to get upset and yell at you about it. You can't use that as a basis of restriction of speech. That's First Amendment. 14th Amendment rights. Jimmy got an equal right to education. We beat that one to death over several courses. And that also goes into the discussion we've had of what are you doing to prevent bullying? What are you doing to prevent excessive discipline, disparaging remarks from faculty, differential treatment by faculty, negative differential treatment? What are you doing to ensure that these two kids have an equal access to education as everybody else? Personally, I'd have hauled all the administrators into a room and been like, you got to get ahead of that one. You dropped the ball already, but you got to get ahead of this one. Is how are you going to make sure this doesn't spin out of control even further? Title IX, I think we've talked about Title IX already. Something interesting I found out from the Department of Ed's website is For South Carolina folks, some of the recent Biden administration Title IX rule interpretations, if you get called into that one, make sure you're talking to your legal department because the decision's been vacated in the state of South Carolina pending legal cases. So if you're running into this one on gender or sexual orientation, one of the phone calls we haven't mentioned needs to be your district lawyer and say, okay, what are we doing? Help me keep out of jail.
Let's
We've
talk
already
about
talked
that
about
one for just a second. I don't want to get too deeply. You won't be held harmless if it goes bad. Let me say that. If the law is on the book and your state is fighting it, and it hadn't gone to the circuit court or the Supreme Court, if you need to be able to document that these people told you to do it. You didn't just say, well, I'm going to be a good soldier and follow along. The state's bucking, this because they didn't like who was president and they're bucking this. And so I'm just going to go along with the state on this one. Make sure that the state directs you to not follow the law or the policy, because you won't be held harmless later on. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. But if it's decided later on that the state has to go along with this and you didn't, and there's a lawsuit, you're protected under that they directed you to do this. But you just said, I'm going to be a team player and I'm going to do this on my own. And no, don't. You can't be held harmless in these cases. If it blows back on the state, then it blows back. But they take the brunt and not you.
So always nice to have those. How do you get out of jail free cards on that one?
Yeah.
We already talked about the Equal Access Act. I'm looking through my notes real quick. I don't think I have anything else to toss on there. I mean, if you didn't want to do the Day of Silence or Diversity Day because what I got out of that one is you don't have to do those days the way Jimmy and Willie want you to do them.
No, you don't have to do them.
Yeah.
They can plan them and do them on their own, but they better come back to class on time. You're not required to do that, but the club you are.
Exactly. Got to do the club, the days. You can say no because if you believe that disturbs the educational environment, or you can make you provide them opportunity to do it such that it does not disturb the educational environment.
Exactly. They can plan and do it on their own. Absolutely.
I kind of like the idea of a diversity day. Say, okay, we can do a diversity day, but everybody gets to play. FERPA, I think we talked about FERPA well. Things Mary Lou should not have done. I want to say one thing that I'm going to lead into Olivia's discussion on Jerry and Cindy. I think I already talked about she should not have told the kids that their activities were disruptive to the learning process and risk for possible harm. We talked about that one. Talked about your jobs provide equal access to educational opportunity and prevent harm to students. And then in the conversation with Jerry and Cindy, that one was a bad conversation in the first place. That one should have ended as soon as they opened their mouths about the specific students. But I'm gonna turn it over to Olivia at that point.
Okay, so how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy? Well, I first put that they should contact the board, or like the principal should contact the board attorney and superintendent.
Yep.
And then earlier, you added in law enforcement, which is a great idea. She cannot discuss students with other parents. The Equal Access Act, the schools cannot deny access to or discriminate against any group of students. They cannot deny access to the student's meeting or attending prom because of parents or community members. And the unpopularity of views is no reason to deny students rights or speech. So, there's no standing there. And next slide, Roger, please. Should Mary Lou allow Willie and Jimmy to attend the prom? Well, of course, because schools cannot deny students those rights, and then the principal must create a plan to protect the student rights and provide a safe environment, but she cannot deny them those rights, because of course that also is a bunch of discrimination, and she cannot do that. So I think that's it for me, Roger. I'll let you finish it up.
Hey, Roger, I got one quick save around if you don't mind. I apologize on that one. One of the things I forgot to, I was looking at my notes again, is talking about Mary Lou and her handling of Jerry and Cindy and her handling of the whole case. And I can't help but think that part of her decision making in this case study is driven by, I'm going to get sued. Well, you're going to get sued no matter what in this case.
Yeah.
You're going to get sued either by the parents of the gay kids, or you're going to get sued by the parents of the anti-gay kids.
Yep.
So to quote Dr. Lamb, the decision making this one has to be one of you're enforcing policy and law, and you're doing right by students' education.
You champion for kids, and you're following law and policy. That's what we hired you to do. Remember, that's been our constant theme this entire semester is you have to be a champion for kids. And that means you follow law and policy. That's how you be a champion for kids. You follow law and policy, not be a champion for parents or for teachers or people who want their way. You have to be a champion for kids. And you know, they hired you to follow law and policy. You can't go wrong. Yes, you'll get sued, but if you got law and policy behind you, you will prevail. Now, does that mean that people will like you? Probably not. But again, we go back to the case of the clerk of court in Kentucky that denied the marriage license to the two gay fellas. All the people in the community was boosting her up until she went to court and lost everything, lost all of her, you know, all of her assets, and then they weren't anywhere to be found. That's what happens. They want you to do their bidding for them, but now you know, not only would you lose your assets, in this case, you'd lose your job, you'd lose your license because you didn't fulfill your number one obligation to uphold law and policy. And again, and I'm going to say this as somebody who's lived both lives, don't sacrifice your career for the people at the central office. Well, we would, you know, you're not a team player. You didn't handle it in the house. No. My job is not to make your life comfortable at the central office as a principal. You're there. The only reason you exist is because schools exist. You're supposed to do something. You're supposed to take some of these slings and arrows and heat. This should be you. You've got to stand up. You're at the leadership level, has to stand up and say these people are doing what they're supposed to be doing out here in schools, because they just follow law and policy. They don't make any. Their job's not to think. Their job is just to follow law and policy. But now a lot of people in the central office want the school people to stand up and take the slings and arrows for them, not to damage their career. That's not your job as a school-based leader. You're to be a champion for kids, follow law and policy. And if the people in central office don't like that, then you're working in the wrong district. They've got to know why they're at the central office. It's not a standalone organization. Without schools, central office doesn't exist. I mean, we could go over there to Cool Springs and close that section down if we didn't have schools in Rutherford County. It's exactly right. They only exist because we exist. There's no chicken and egg here. There's no debate. Schools exist first and then central office. We have to come first. Schools have to come first. And don't ask school people to sacrifice their career for your career ambitions in the central office. But that's what a lot of central office people, they're so egotistical. That's what they'll do. You can't fall into that trap of your job is to please them. It is not. It is not. And the good ones will understand that. All right. How do we minimize bullying and cyberbullying?
Okay, so this will be brief. I'm just going to take the pages from the great Dr. Lamb's book. So first, you need to know your policies and procedures that you need to follow when you're working as a principal. Anything that interrupts the school environment, that means handle it right away. Take immediate action. Once you review those guidelines, then you need to act accordingly to what those guidelines say. Report what is needed to be reported, to who it needs to be reported to in order to save your job. And for me, that basically boils down to it. I do think that one thing that you cannot do is wait until an incident happens to address the situations. So all year long, we need to be talking about bullying. We need to be talking about cyberbullying. We need to address it in a positive light and, alert them of the consequences if you are caught doing these things, and, teaching them right from wrong, I think, from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I believe that is it for us, guys.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Here's a statistic for you. 85%, let me say that number again. 85% of all medical conditions will eventually work themselves out and go away. What happens in the other 15%? It kills you. All right. So the metaphor here is about 85% of the stuff that comes across your desk. If you didn't deal with it, it'll eventually go away. But there's 15% that comes across your desk if you don't deal with it, and even if you do, it may kill you anyway. But the notion here is the only shot you've got is to deal with it. You know, if you don't, and people say, well, I just don't handle stuff like that. It'll all blow away. 85% of the time it will. But the other 15% of the time that it doesn't blow away, it kills you. Here's an idea. If you deal with it, pretty much, then it's only like 1% of the time that it kills you. Let me say that again. If you deal with it, that 15% becomes 1% if you deal with it, if you get medical treatment. If you do intervention, then that kill rate drops from 15% to 1%. That's medical, folks. That's how the numbers work. And so the whole argument of this case is, this is one of that 15%. What are you going to do? Are you going to let it kill you? Are you going to take the chance and turn it into that, it might be that 1% that gets you, but that's a lot better odds, I think, that of only 1% than 15%. 15% is too high. So again, I'm extending the metaphor here. You need to intervene. You don't need to let this get out of control. You need to call in the superintendent, the law enforcement. And the whole idea here is antecedent behaviors. The little things, if left unattended, become the big things. And that infected toe eventually kills you, like it did Bob Marley. Yep, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. All right, David, what you and Althea got?
Althea, you there? You're the brains behind this operation. Let's go. You guys see that?
Yes.
All right. So I know we hit on a few things. There's just one small thing that's still.
I'm here. I'm having trouble with my camera, but I'm here.
Great.
Hi, Althea. Thank you for putting this. So Althea and I are a great team. I send her some information and she makes it beautiful. It's unbelievable. But one small thing that's still lingering with me, I can't figure out, is Heckler's veto as it pertains to the disruption to the learning process. So I'm hoping the class or Dr. Lamb could help me. So the kids, no one knew that the two gay kids were a couple, right? Until they came out publicly. Then the kids started talking to their parents. Next thing you know, the teacher's phone's ringing off the hook. At what point, and then we have petitions from parents and students. That's the key, and students in the school. At what point is this a disruption to the classroom? I know that the principal already missed the opportunity to call the superintendent, bring in the cavalry of counselors. But at this point, isn't your learning environment disrupted? And at that point, would the teacher or the principal have some leeway legally to shut this down from the kids? I'm just saying, this seems like a conservative area, with 100 teachers have a petition or parents petition, the temperature is hot.
Yeah.
If there's an actual threat, the parents show up at the school, half the other kids who aren't involved, parents are going to keep their kids home. No one wants none of that. At what point is this a disruption to the learning environment? That's where I'm still uncertain. Like legally, does the principal have some bandwidth to shut this thing down, the gay straight alliance and everything, because it's a threat or disruption to the school? That's what would say you?
Well, see, that's the part of heckler's veto is you're punishing the shut down the gay straight alliance is you're punishing the victim here. That's the whole notion of the veto. And that disrupts the educational environment when everybody doesn't have the same ability to learn and grow and self-actualize and do all those things. And that's exactly the point of heckler's veto is if we don't let them go to prom, if we take that away from them, then their educational rights have been denied. If we don't let them form a group like we do other kids, because of what somebody else might do, because the loudest and stupidest are now reigning. That's the whole idea of heckler's veto, where we can't let the loudest and stupidest abridge the rights of the other kids who their only crime in this case was PDA. We should have stopped that. That's on us for not stopping it. It's not, how many times have you seen a sign that says it's not a crime to be gay? And that's what they're referring to, is that they're being punished like criminals for being gay. And if you abridge their rights in any way that everybody else would have, then you have effect have disrupted the educational environment for those kids. That's the whole notion of heckler's veto, is we can't use what somebody else might do or is doing in this case to punish the innocent. That the mob can't rule. The loudest and stupidest we can't let them get their way. That's we don't have martial law or mob rule here. That our job is to uphold law and policy for the gay kids the same as anybody else's kids.
Unless, like Sean said, there was precedent, right?
Yeah.
So what if, I'm just playing devil's advocate because we've covered this case study. What if the principal or superintendent has dealt with this situation in the past?
Yeah.
And has seen the outcome, the parent petitions and everything. What at that point?
But then that's when the superintendent, that's why we called him. If he's dealt with this or whatever, then he's got a policy in place. We just follow whatever that is. And that's why we call him first, and we call law enforcement. All right, if y'all dealt with this before, y'all give me directions of what you want me to do now. Because if you dealt with this before, obviously we have a protocol that we have entered into in our district that we feel like we can legally defend. Or if you can't legally defend it, I'm covered by y'all because y'all told me to do it. Yeah, and that's what I was referring to before, is like Sean was talking about South Carolina. Tell me what you want me to do. And I'm indemnified because I did what I was told to do. Now, if y'all lose in court later on, I'm still clean. But if I just do it on my own, because I know the political climate and I choose not to enforce a law or policy, and when it gets to Richmond in the Fourth Circuit and the state of South Carolina loses, or they get to the Supreme Court and they lose, I'm not indemnified. I'm hurt because I stepped out on my own. I wasn't following orders.
Right. Got it. Thank you. Althea, what do you got? Do you want to add anything? I think she's having some technical difficulties, but she put these.
You're right. She does a great job with the presentation.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
I handed her crap, and she came back with this. It was amazing.
You wrote, it was like writing phone numbers on a napkin in the bar. You handed her the equivalent of that. She came up with this. That is a miracle. I know you.
I like y'all segue into the free speech, freedom of expression slide. I started running down that one as well, from trying to find the legal limits of PDA, because I was trying to find some case law that said, okay, what are are PDA policies even legal in a school? And if so, where's the line of legality? This is okay for PDA, but this is not. You know, symbolic expression. And that started running down that one too. I never got to a bottom other than the one case I found out in California that essentially said holding hands is okay, but this hugging and kissing and wrapping yourself around each other is lewd behavior. So therefore, restricted speech.
Well, that's why we go. The state manual says that in schools that we pay for, that we send money, pay the teachers, that you can't have these acts, and it lists all of them, you know, in the manual. Now, it leaves it up to the local to define what those standards are for those. Like aggressive behavior. What's aggressive behavior? Well, the local has to do that. That's the whole point. People say, well, we developed this code of conduct and think, well, it took 15 minutes. No, those things take years because you have to hammer out all this language. That's why I said the good thing about the acts of crime and violence, the state does that for you. Those 17 acts of crime and violence, they embarrassingly define those for you. As an old Baptist, I'm telling you, it's embarrassing to read that stuff. But everything else, the local has to figure out what the local community standard is for, you know, public display of affection. They have to figure out what is aggressive behavior. They have to figure out the big one in Charlotte all the time, and I think it's probably this way in most urban districts, is what is insubordination. And we went to a rule that on assault on school personnel without injury. If you block the door, if a kid was trying to leave your room and you physically blocked the door and he pushed through you, that was not an assault. We made that determination one time in Charlotte. We made a determination. Now, the legal code, again, in the manual, it's called affray, AFFRAY, and that's a public fight. And so in Charlotte, it got hard. How do you defend? What is a public fight for an affray? Because that's a criminal offense. That's more than just fighting. Well, we finally decided that there was areas, what was it? No hitting zone. If it was like a cafeteria, an auditorium, a big open area where a lot of people could join in, we determined that was an affray. Now, if they were inside of a classroom that was contained, it was just a fight. Those are the things you have to work through. You have to come up with those definitions for your district, and they must be legally defendable in the court in your town. Will they be upheld when you go to court? And so we had a lot of those kinds of things that we had to work through over the years, and these definitions, you know, an assault. All right, two kids are fighting. Sean and David are fighting. Where's Olivia? Olivia comes and join in. She's helping Sean because he's on her team. Is that still a fight?
Well, we won, by the way, so the fight's over.
Well, I know that. Olivia claims she was with both of you. I know that. She's baling hay the other day in heat that made I couldn't even stand it inside. She's baling hay outside. What are you talking about? Rutherford County, you can't get your breath there. The air's so thick. All right. So what we determined is that if David and Sean are fighting and Olivia comes in and joins Sean and Olivia are now participating in an assault. It's two or more on one. And so, you know, that joining your buddy in a fight deal, that makes it more punitive where, and that kind of slows down the big affrays, you know, where more than two kids are fighting and getting into a big, you know, that was one of the ways that we were able to bring that to bear when kids would just get in an area and then just start a big hullabaloo. That happened as a result of, in 1997, a new high school was opened up on the eastern side of Charlotte out in Matthews, David Butler High School. The very first day, and it brought in different communities that had never gone to school before. And the very first day in the lobby of the school, some kids kind of got rowdy, different sects or groups or whatever, and they had a resource officer that was from Mint Hill, the little town of Mint Hill, and kind of panicked and pulled out pepper spray, sent 29 kids to the hospital with pepper spray. And kids started rioting in high schools all over. I still got a scar under each eye. I was high school principal at Olympic during the time, and I came out of the crowd with one under each arm. And then Channel 9, they made me public information, made me do a interview with Kim Bratton from Channel 9 with the 2 cuts on my face, that we weren't going to allow this in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, that we were trying to get, we were going to calm these down, but they were rioting in every high school across the district because they felt like that it was wrong to tear gas kids in their own high school that were just standing around watching. It kind of got out of control there. That was part of public information. I was one of them people that have done that. They brought public information in and said, we need to get on the news media. They called Kim Bratton, who was education reporter for Channel 9. Dale's going to do an interview with you. Here's the questions. We vetted these, about what we're going to do. And he's supposed to go on and calm fears that while we're here for your children, that, big old overgrown people like him, that we're going to stop this. We're not going to allow this to happen. We're basically, I was reassuring parents that we weren't going to let these kids run our schools, kind of thing. That was my role. And I was all big and overgrown next to Kim Bratton, real attractive, with a big cut on both sides of my face, just sitting there like I had good sense, like, you don't try me, that kind of thing, to try to, to make sure parents understood. And I don't know if it was the work that somebody else did, but it worked. It just worked. I can't tell you. It stopped overnight. I had a couple scars to deal with, but I wasn't that good looking to start with. And so that's absolutely, you could probably go back to the archives of Channel 9 from back in the late 90s and see me on TV. But that's what I'm talking about. You call the superintendent, you get people involved, all kind of resources come to bear. Now, it might have been a coin flip. It could have just been coincidence, but we got it stopped. And it was nasty there for a few days, folks. I'm telling you, it was nasty. Kids would just, we had the assembly in the gym, and they just emptied the stands and started. I mean, it was just, and they, trying to attack the adults in the room. I mean, it was out of control. But understanding this was the era of Columbine. Kids felt bad. This was Jonesboro, Arkansas. And then you come in and tear gas 29 kids and put them in the hospital. Yeah, it was a little intense there for a couple of days. But the overarching notion here is you are a part of a bigger organization. You're a champion for kids. You uphold law and policy. If you step out on that ledge because the state has stepped out on it, make sure that you have the protection. I followed what they told me to do. I didn't just assume I should do this, and like the lady up in Kentucky, she has just assumed the standards of her community that we don't like this. Well, she had no legal protection. And that's unfortunate here. And so, but again, this case is about any federally protected class, understanding that they have rights that just go simply beyond due process, just like with EC kids and discipline. You got to know this stuff. That's why we have you, the very first thing, identify the special pops in your building, not only to schedule, but so that you'll know who they are. What do they get? What are they getting? What they're supposed to get? That understand what protections they have, what special laws go along with them, like FERPA for EC kids. You have to know all that stuff. It's a lot to know. It truly is a lot to know. I can't make it any less. Again, our job is to not lose our house every day, to know all the stuff that's most relevant. I try to pick the cases that are most relevant. That leads me into talking about the next one. It's all about the inclusion model in EC. It's about not supervising classes and not doing. It's everything that you've learned so far, the two blocks that you've had in the MSA program. It all comes to bear. That those long-term goals, those community meetings, those parent meetings, that should be done in the next case study. That's how that kicks in. Is we got these parents that don't understand core instruction. They don't understand the inclusion model. We've got teachers that are not following the state script. Nobody's going in their room and seeing what they're doing. I mean, it's everything that we've talked about so far comes to fruition in this next one. So I told you, the first one, teacher was wrong. Second one, that's hard for people who have been teachers, hard for all of us. Then, the point of the superintendent being wrong is, it's the best case for money, but also that even the highest ranking person in your district can't move money inappropriately. So, you can't. And then this one is letting a little thing become a big thing and learning about protected classes. And all the extra due process they have. And then our last one, of course, would be exceptional children, but it encompasses everything that we do. And at the end, our goal here is to hit all the real hot spots, and how you would go about dealing with them. The things that are most likely, law and finance are the things that are most likely to cost you your job. Are law and finance things, not upholding the law or policy or misspending the money. Those are the two things that get you. Those are the two things that get you. Now, bad personal behavior aside, I'm talking about people who are, really trying to do their job. Now, if you're diddling the help, you deserve to get fired. I'm not here to help you get around that. Leave the help alone. Don't be having relationships with them. But I'm talking about you're actually a professional trying to do your job. The things that can get you are the law and policy or the money. And so we're trying to make sure that we hit all of those adequately. All right. Anybody have anything else for the good of the group? Again, I'm very pleased with your work. Everything's going well. Make sure that you're looking at the timeline. We've only got a couple more weeks. It's going to be August before you know it. It's already the 17th of the month. We end 2 weeks from Friday this week. It's all over with. So make sure you get all your work in. I read it every day. I really like reading your work. You do really good work. I really like reading your reflections of these cases as well. I'm glad your teams are working well. That pleases me. And I like it when y'all say, I really like my teammates. Some of these people, you'll stay in contact the rest of your professional career. That's very important. You're building, but even if you don't, you're learning how to build professional relationships, and that's important. Can't go it alone in this business. You need a support system. All right. I will see y'all next week for our last regular class session, and we have one more case study after that. I appreciate you. Everybody have a good week. Thank you.
Got one
Thanks,
question for you,
guys.
sir.
All right. Let me turn off the recording.